Hello and welcome to Kirsty Knits and Sews YouTube channel. This is my channel where I talk about all things knitting and occasionally other crafty things. Today I will be talking to you about stash. About 2022 and 2023 and upcoming plans to use my stash. Now, I know a lot of people do stash down where you can only knit from your stash, don't buy anything new. That's not my plan, but I just was starting to do my planning for next year and organize things, and I thought, you know what, let's do this together. Let's take you along so you can see what I've done this year, what I'm planning to do next year, what has worked and what hasn't worked for me. And maybe it can inspire you to think up some ways to, I don't know, use your stash or do things a bit differently in the coming year as well. I always love watching videos like this. I'm hoping you'll enjoy watching this video as well. The first thing I will show you is what I've done this year in 2022, and that is use a knitter's bullet journal. Now this is one that unfortunately is not available anymore. It is done, printed every year, I think in September or October, and then sent out so that you have it by the beginning of the year. You can buy it directly from Hanama Hansrud, I'm probably butchering that, at Middlestrick directly. I will link her down below so that you can find her and follow her for next year's one. I love this. And I'm just going to give you a quick tour of last year's one. At the beginning, it has a month day and a list of projects, some goals, and finished objects, unfinished objects, and total grams used from that month. And so as you go through, you can keep track of when you've started, when you finish, how much grams you've used. Having things written down every month, and at the beginning of every month, writing them down, has really helped me to keep on top of what my projects are. No longer am I looking at my project bags going, I have no idea what's in them. I know what's in them. I work on them. The thing that I didn't use last year is you have a note page every month. I didn't use it, but what a difference that this year has is that it doesn't have, at the beginning, it doesn't have goals on this page. You have more room for projects, but no goals. So what I'm planning to do is on the next page, put my 3 goals on that page. They also have note pages, so you can put any notes about it, but I'd love to get little pictures of what I've done so I have a visual representation, not just the information. But it's really good because I have start dates, end dates, needle size. If I do a gauge swatch, I have gauge, I have pattern, I have yarn. All of that information is here, which means if I do put something down and I don't come back to it for a while, or I steal the needles for another project, who's done that before, I know what needles I've been using. What I might change is when it says needles, I might also include the brand of needles, because I do get a different gauge between Chiaogu and Addy circulars. Mainly I think because the tips are so different. I don't know how many project pages there were for last year. This year there are 50. The other thing that I like this year, it has a list of finished objects, and then it has pattern categories, so you can keep track of what you knit most, and also finished objects per month, which I've also included grams used per month and grams bought per month. So I just have a little graph to have a quick overview of the year. This is grams, not meters, which means if I buy or use DK and worsted, it does skew the data because most of my knitting is fingering weight. And it means that if I do finish a jumper, I finished an Aran sweater that used almost a kilo of yarn, or more than a kilo of yarn, it skews the data a little because that is much less meterage than if I used a kilo of fingering weight. But the ease and simplicity of doing it in grams rather than meters, I'm going to keep. The other thing that I did this year that I will change for next year, she has places for stash. Now what I've done is when I finish it, I highlight it so I know that I don't have that in my stash anymore. I will keep that. What I didn't do this year that I'm going to do next year is I'm going to have a page for fingering, a page for DK, a page for worsted. But when I say a page, I mean multiple pages. I counted up how many fingering weight yarns I still have that are written down in this book, not including a few that I've bought since I kind of gave up keeping track of this book. I will add them into my overall stash grams, but I don't have room to add them to purchases because I've purchased too much. But what I realized is I have almost 120 fingering weight yarns already. 120. Each one of these pages has room for 30, or at least on next year's one, each one has room for 30, which means that I need at least 4 pages of fingering weight yarn for the stash. So what I've done is I've gone through the top and I've written fingering sock and I've written fingering, because I like to know what sock yarns I have and what non-sock yarns I have, because I do knit a lot of socks. But then I've also put one that's DK. I have almost enough to fill this page already with DK, which means that if I buy more I will be in trouble. So I've put on the next page DK and worsted, because I have worsted but not as many. Then the ones that I barely use at all, lace, sport, bulky, super bulky, other, they all will get the same page because I basically never use any of them. I think I have 1 super bulky yarn in my stash, 3 lace including a mohair that I use to hold double with fingering. I had 1 sport, I've just got another 5 for Christmas, and bulky I don't think I have any. So they will all go on the same page. This will serve 2 purposes, splitting them up. 1, it'll be easier to find, update, stash when I use it or when I buy it. But the second thing that I will find really useful about this is that it will help me see what I use, because at the end of the year I can flick through, and if all of my DK ones are used or most of them are used and I just have a couple of sweater quantities left, I know that when I buy DK I use DK. If I have, my few here left for the strange weights that I never use, then I know that I don't use them even when I have them, so it's probably not worth using them or worth buying them. I do have to figure out what I'm going to do with the yarn that I dye. Do I include it when I dye it? Do I include it when I buy it? Do I include it when I decide to keep it? The other things that I've changed or added to is I've added another yarn stash page, because I knew what was there will not be enough for what I will finish the year with probably. It's barely enough for what I have now. So what I've done is I've created another yarn stash page, which will be specifically for minis, and I may need to do more. There's another couple of blank pages at the back that I can add in, but because minis, if I buy them as minis, I want to include them in stash, so when I use them I can take them out of stash. But at the moment, anything less than 50 grams usually just goes straight into scraps. I started the year counting all of my scraps and my yarn page was just overwhelmed. So I'm just moving scraps to a different category. But minis that I have bought, I want to be able to include. And so I will have a separate page for that. And the other thing that I'm doing differently is I've created another project page at the back, the very, very back, which is for long-term scrappy projects. Now at the moment, the only long-term scrappy projects I have are blankets. And I haven't obviously filled them out yet. But I've prepared the page so that they're there. And what this will mean is that throughout the months, I do not have to write them on this page. Because here, I think I only have 1 here, 2. But here I have long-term scrappy projects in my monthly one, and some of them every month I've rewritten them in since I cast them on, and I know that they might take me 2, 3, 4 years to finish, and I don't want to either take up room in my project page from every month writing them in, and I also don't want to just spend the time every month writing them in when I know I'm not going to finish them and there is no hope of finishing them at the moment. Most of them I don't even have the yarn to finish them because they're scrappy. I need to make more scraps so that I can finish them. So having a page at the back where I can write them in once, they're there, I know that they're there, I can work on them. If I do Scrappy Sunday, I can just flick to the back and go, what scrappy projects do I have? Yeah, I'm very excited for that. So that is what I have done so far in preparation for next year. What I have to go is going through my stash, writing everything from my stash in those yarn stash pages. Because I didn't say this, it's December 28th. Yes, it's Wednesday, December 28th. My plans for the next few days are pretty big. Whether I can get them done or not is a different question. This is what my current December looks like. But what I've done, you can see some little dots in the corners here. These are the 5 projects that I would like to get finished by the end of this year. Like I said, it's December 28th. I've got today, tomorrow, Friday and Saturday. And that's it. And I have 2 kids and a brand new puppy. Alright, I'm doing this so that I can see a physical difference between this year and this time next year. This is my fingering weight sock stash, aside from that ball there, which is not sock yarn, and that up there, it's just fibre. Everything else is fingering weight sock yarn. These 2 here are sweater quantities. So they're here because they're fingering sock yarn, but I will not use them for socks unless I have leftovers after my sweaters. That's a lot of yarn. What would I like to see this time next year? Less. I would like to use more than I buy this year. I want to knit socks. I'm going to pick 12 from what you see here to knit this year, 1 a month, to actually deliberately work on this. I would also love to see this whole section up here of pre-wound yarn. I want to work through that. It is much easier for me to store skeins that are not wound, and much prettier to look at skeins that are not wound. So these ones that are wound, I wound them up because I was planning to knit and then I never did. So I want to actually deliberately work through that. All right, we will see what this looks like next year. I'm going to keep adding to this bed. I'm hoping to finish cataloguing yarn today so I can add to the bed, put everything down, and talk you through it completely before Ilsa wakes up. So I'm going to go back to cataloguing and I will see how far I get. Here it is, my yarn stash in its entirety, with the exception of whips. Wowzers. All right, let's talk you through this. At the bottom, we have sock yarn in balls or in skeins. These 2 are DK. I think that one might be Sport. It says it should be fingering by yardage, but it feels thicker to me. So it's either Sport or DK, and I'll just make some DK socks out of them. But the rest of these ones down the bottom are sock yarn. Then over here we have more sock yarn. These are minis, sock blanks, self-dyed, some more minis that I'm going to make into some shorties, some scraps or partially used skeins, and then these ones here are all unused but pre-wound skeins, which I want to work through. This one and this one, they came as 250 gram set, just like this set here. Love them. These ones are indie dyed. For the most part, I think those 2 are sport weight and that one is DK, but not sock yarn. So I'm not sure what to do with them. I got them on a really good deal because they were, I guess, test skeins. So I'm not sure what to do with them. We've got my fibre that I'm planning to spin and make into a jumper this year. We have, as in I got it for Christmas, that's brand new. We have some cotton that I'm going to make into some dishcloths. Up here is a lot of my non-sock fingering yarn that I'm just not entirely sure what to do with. The rest of my non-sock fingering yarn is down here, and I'll probably try, with the merino, I'll try and do some kind of Colorwork sweaters. I've got some silk, I've got some cotton merino, and I've got some plain cotton, and I don't generally use plain cotton, so I'm not sure what to do with that. In here we've got some novelty yarn. These ones I'll see if I can turn into sweaters for my children. They're acrylic and wool. I think these two I got for beanies. Whether or not I do that or not is another matter. And these ones are kind of a lace weight sparkly yarn that's acrylic and polyester, I believe. What I've done previously with that is I've held it double with the green one. I held double with this green one to make into DK socks, and that worked well. So I might do that a few more times with them, or hold them with something to make a sweater for the kids, because it'll be add a little sparkle, a bit of fun. And then we get into sweater quantities. Oh, and these ones here to make a Musselburgh for my husband, and that one's to make a beanie for me. I don't tend to use bulky or super bulky or sport weight yarn much. I'm basically a fingering DK worsted girl. But this one is a super bulky and that one is a bulky. So we'll see how I go doing that. These two here, the green one and the blue one, are both lace weight. Now, I've never knit anything just in lace weight yarn. The orange I bought in Beechworth, Australia, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and I was planning to make a scarf, and I hated knitting it. Not because the yarn was a problem, but because I wasn't used to knitting on needles that small and with yarn that fine, and I got cramps. I now do a lot of sock knitting, so I don't think it'll be as bad. And there is a shawl that I want to make, and so I think I'll make it with the teal, and then if I like it enough, I might make an orange one too. But that includes beading, so I have to figure out how to do beading with knitting. And the teal one I got in America. That was a souvenir years and years ago, and I've long since lost the tag. And by years and years, I mean like over 10 years ago, I picked that up. All right, then we get into sweater quantity plans. These 5 here from Dye Dye Done, I'm going to make the Dinos on Holiday sweater, which is, these yarns are a Christmas present this year. So again, they haven't been sitting there long, and I plan to make that in time to wear next year. This is for the Birch pullover by Andrea Mowry of Dre Renee Knits that I dyed late last year in order, like August, September. I dyed that in order to make it, and I haven't touched it. These ones I dyed to make a sweater. I thought maybe I'd make the Birch pullover out of it, and then I realized I needed 5 skeins, not 4. So I will make something else out of that. I'm not sure what. These ones are ones that I originally bought for this project, but it was a different grey, and I knew that, but I ended up deciding to go with the same grey, so I now have a sweater quantity to make something out of here. This one, I want to make the Rae, R-A-E, pullover, which I bought a while ago to make. The blue on top is leftovers from my shawlography. The white and pink I bought to make this sweater to use up my leftovers. Yeah, and I still haven't made it, but I looked at it and I decided I do really actually want to make that, so I will do that. This is some white and red sparkly yarn that I want to make something for Ilsa for Christmas. So, okay, so here we go. There's a few here that I've got. These ones are DK sparkly. These ones down here have some that I originally bought to make kids sweaters, and my kids are growing up quick and I'm going to need more yarn to make them. So I'll either put some together to make a Colorwork sweater, or I might leave them, so if someone I know has a baby, I can just whip them up a sweater with what I've got on hand. I would like to do Colorwork, so we'll see how I go with that. If you hear some baby talking in the background, my daughter's just woken up, so I'll go get her up as soon as I finish this. All right, these ones are Bendigo Tweed. This one's left over from a project I made for my dad, and this one I bought because I just loved it. And I think I was thinking a single, like it's 200 grams of DK. So I was thinking I could get a small sweater or like do some Colorwork something, and I haven't touched it. This is 2 skeins of matching fingering weight, which again, kid sweater was the plan. But all of these, when I say kid sweater is the plan, I don't have any patterns picked out or anything, and so I haven't actually done it. These ones here, I got in the hope of designing my own Fair Isle sweater. I haven't thought about it yet. If I find a pattern I like, I might just make one that someone else has designed, but that's all 8-ply Blue Face Leicester wool. Up here, we have the leftovers, the rest of the leftovers from my shawlography. The navy, the light blue, the brown and the pink. I did buy an extra light blue in case I wanted to make this one with a light blue, but I think I'm going to stick with the pink on here. And I bought 5 skeins, or 5 balls of the almond to turn those leftovers into a Strea cardigan, also by Andrea Murray of Dre Renee Knits. Now, I've just done some deep thinking as I've been cataloguing all this, and I looked at the pattern and I'm just not feeling that pattern. The birch pullover, which will be this one, is the same design but as a pullover, not a cardigan. But the reason I'm not a huge fan of that one is that it has horizontal stripes. And a year ago I was really feeling it, but I didn't cast it on. This year I'm not really feeling it. And I don't want to spend that much time doing fisherman rib or half fisherman rib or whatever it is to make a cardigan that I probably won't reach for. So I have a lot of that yarn, and I will either look at making a shawl out of it or find another sweater. There's a few Colorwork sweaters using 4-ply that I have really enjoyed looking at, so I might try and do like a Colorwork yoke sweater with that instead. And at the back here, I've got my test swatch done. That is for my husband, and that is one that I'm planning to get done this year once I clear my needles. Up the back here, I have a whole lot of knitting for Olive 4-ply that I originally bought to make dresses and tops and rompers for my daughter. But I moved and I didn't make any of the clothes. I did make a bonnet out of what I bought. But I have a lot of like 100 gram or 150 gram sets there that I now need to figure out what to do. Whether again, I combine into Colorwork or I leave them for when a friend has a baby. So that is my yarn stash. Like I said before, I'm going to pick 12 from this bottom to turn into socks 1 a month. I'm also going to try and pick out, or at least like store Christmas together. So when I want to do Christmas, I have them all there. I'm going to put together in bags maybe the sweater quantities, so I know when I want to do this, I can just reach for it and all of it's there, all of it's there, all of it's there. For the ones that I don't have patterns for, but are still sweater quantity, I might, I'll still keep them together, but I'm not sure whether I'll put them in bags or not. But like these ones, which are all the same type of yarn, I'll probably put them in a bag so that if I'm wanting fingering weight Colorwork, I can be like, oh, I have some of that. And same for these ones up here, which are DK weight for Colorwork. And then I'm going to store all of these fingering weight yarns. I will store together so that, again, if there's a pattern I like, I can go, oh, what fingering weight yarn do I have that I can pull for this? Obviously, all my sock yarn I can also pull for sweaters and Colorwork, and I know that. But these ones that don't have nylon in them are the ones that I don't use for socks, and therefore they're kind of just sweater shawl territory. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to write a list of the things that I actually have yarn for: the Musselburgh, the Dinah's on Holiday, the birch pullover, the spice cardigan, I didn't mention the name of that one, and write them down so that when I'm going, what am I going to knit next for a big project, I have the list, I can pull out for that, and I can prioritize what I've already done. That is my plan. I'm back. I've already remembered 2 more bags of yarn that I haven't catalogued, so I will put them into my book after this, but I just thought I'd show you now. These ones are a bit of a mess. These are all Hobby Winter Glow wool acrylic. Now, I bought them to make a night shift shawl by Dre Renee Knits. I was not enjoying how this was knitting up, so I decided to scrap it. I just took the needles out. I haven't frogged it yet. I may just cut it, not frog it. But I have all of these. What I will probably do with these is just make some basic sweaters for the kids. They wear and grow, like they're growing quite quickly. They'll wear whatever I knit for them. And they've already got a variegated yarn. So I'll probably just say, kid, pick a colour and I'll knit you a sweater. They're, let's see, 700 metres each. So at the moment, that would be definitely enough for Ilsa, mostly enough for Zach. I might do contrasting cups or something. So I found them. I will catalogue them. The other thing, which is, in my opinion, much more exciting, is this one, which is a sweater quantity of Miss Nitsky in Midsummer Night Macarena DK. So this is a merino cashmere nylon. So I could use it for socks if I wanted to. And this one is a one skein of Malabrigo Dos Tierras Aniversario. These ones are going to become an alley sweater, which I'm very excited to cast on this year. So there you go. I found more yarn, and I will probably continue to find more yarn, but I will catalogue these and then I will pick my 12 from down here and I will start putting away. The other thing I'm going to do, which I didn't mention, I might use that box there for this, is any yarn that I'm not really feeling, like I'm not loving the look of, the feel of, I'm unlikely to knit with it, like, you know, maybe this one in here or these ones, I'm going to put it in this box. And what my plan to do with that will be either by the end of the year to use it and have it in a sweater for a kid or a beanie or something, beanie and give it away, whatever it is, or that can be the box that when I'm teaching someone to knit, I can say, hey, here are some yarns, come have a look, see what you like, take something to learn. Alright, so the numbers are in. I've written down totals from 2022. I've written here 2021. Oh gosh, I'm out of it. I've got here totals for 2022 for what I've used for my stash, and I have counts for 2023, what I have currently, as well as plans for using it in the next year. Now, sorry, the angle's a little strange. I figured the best place to do this would be in front of my giant stash. I should also say, I don't know if this is giant for most people. It is big for me. It represents a lot of money that I've spent on yarn, and I want to be a good steward of my money. I want to use the stuff that I have, and I have bought them for jumpers and sweaters and socks. I want to use them and gift them, or at least use it somehow in my life. That is what I see yarn for. I love buying to buy. I love buying to look at, but I also love buying to use. And if I have too much yarn in my stash, then I go, well, am I actually using my money well? So, little disclaimer. So for 2021, I used, over the entire year, 10 kilos, 659 grams of yarn. That's a lot. That does include stuff that I've gifted, but that's a lot. I knit 46 items, 24 for me and 22 for others. I bought 15 kilos, 197 grams. So I bought 4.5 kilos more than I used. And there were 2 months that I didn't buy anything. That was January and February last year that I did not buy anything. In the year, I knit 4 hats, 1 top, 2 shawls, 2 pairs of mittens, 2 accessories, I can't even remember what they were, 1 tea cozy, 1 cowl, 1 rug, this includes crochet, 1 Christmas tree skirt, 3 Christmas tree decorations, 10 sweaters, and 20 pairs of socks. That's almost a sweater a month and almost 2 pairs of socks a month. That's a lot. Now, I have back here more than enough to do 10 sweaters and 20 pairs of socks. So let's have a look at what I have going into this year. Total behind me, I have 241 skeins of yarn. Now that does include yarn that I have in whips, which isn't behind me, but 241 skeins of yarn. I also have 24 minis in addition to that. That is 22 kilos, 219 grams of yarn. Wow. Now, of that, most of it is fingering. I have 82 fingering and 2 DK sock skeins. And then I have all of my non-sock fingering, my non-sock DK worsted and other little bits and pieces. Roughly, it'll be 73,124 meters. That is a lot of yarn. A lot. Because most of my stash is fingering weight, it is around 400 meters per 100 grams. 73,124 meters. It's a lot. I started this year with 10 whips and 2 long-term projects, which I don't count as my whips. They are scrappy blankets that I don't even have enough scraps to finish them yet. So they're long-term, I don't count them. And I have 15 over here. I have 15 skeins of sock yarn that are pre-wound that I would like to work through, at least some of them this year. In my counting of how many skeins I have, how many grams I have, what I did, anything that's 50 grams or more, I've counted as a skein, whether or not it is a complete skein. So if I had 100 grams and I've used 23, then I would still count the last 77 grams as a skein of yarn. And so that's counted in my stash. Anything that's less than 50 grams, I've put into my scraps, except for minis. If I have a mini that I've bought as a mini, be it a 20, I think they're all 20 gram minis, I've counted that separately as a mini. So minis are the only things that are less than 50 grams that I've included in my stash. And I have 500 grams of fibre just at the back there. Not much, it's a new thing, but if I spin that, I expect to buy more, and that is another thing I may have more of in the future. So that is where I am at the beginning of 2023. Like I said, my plan is to knit up at least 12 pairs of socks from stash I currently have. I do have 2 sock books. One is 52 weeks of socks and one is Colorwork something socks. And so I want to make some out of both of those books. I want to make all the socks in both of those books. I won't get all that done this year, but I will start working through those a bit more this year. And I will of course do some vanilla socks. I have bought lots of sock patterns and sweater patterns, and I want to start making the patterns that I've bought. Again, I've spent money on patterns. I want to use them. But I have already back here 5 sweaters worth of yarn that I already have the patterns for. So I've got the yarn and I've got the patterns and they're just waiting to be knit. So they will be my priorities for big pattern or big projects this year, is knitting through those sweaters. I have plenty more patterns that I have patterns and not yarn for yet. I have plenty more patterns on my wish list and more yarn on my wish list, I'm sure. But I would like to knit through those 5 sweaters and at that point start making decisions of what will my next sweaters be. I'm not putting a no-buy restriction on myself. That historically does not work for me. But having such a good idea of what I actually have will help me to make better decisions in the future. I will try to knit from stash first. I have a lot of, not scraps, I have a lot of single balls or single skeins of fingering weight of lots of different colours and styles that I could put together into a Colorwork project, and the same with DK. So I'll start looking specifically for patterns to use my stash, and when I find a pattern that I want, I will look to my stash first before I buy yarn for it. That is my plan. I obviously have kids, so I can make kids sweaters with yarn that will not take as much. There are some scrappy projects like crochet baskets that I want to make that I think I could make with what I have. So what I'm planning to do now, I've got the 5 sweaters that I told you about. I'm going to pick out 12 skeins of sock yarn, possibly pre-wound, possibly still in balls and skeins, that I will make into socks this year. And I'm going to write a list of all the projects that I have plans for. Plans for and plans and yarn for. So I'm going to make some dishcloths from up here. You can just see a little bit of cotton poking out. I have a dishcloth pattern. I have the cotton yarn. I just haven't made them. So I'm going to make a list of those things that I'm still intending to make but haven't quite got around to, so I can start working through the yarn that is already assigned to projects. But the other thing that will help me in this is I don't have a local yarn store. But there are 2 yarn festivals that I went to last year that I would like to go to again this year. One is in September in Torun and one is in November in Wrocław. So if I can try not to buy yarn much the first half of the year and use what I've got, I fully expect that when I go to one or both of those, I will be stocking up on yarn. That also means that come this time next year, I may have used a whole bunch of my stash and then have 5 more projects sitting there waiting, because I'll be buying in September and November for the sweaters for next year. Of the ones that I have behind me, 2 of the sweater quantities that I have patterns and yarn for, I bought them. I bought the yarn in September. One of my whips, I bought the yarn in September. So that's what I've done this year, and you can see behind me that I've bought specifically for projects. I just haven't had the time to knit them up yet. So this is not a no-buy year. I know from history and personal experience that does not work for me. But it is a year where I'm planning to use my stash first. Thanks for joining me.